Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign. I'm your host, RJ Kerr, and today we are going to be working on treasure distribution in one of our adventures. But if you're just joining us for the first time or you're watching the recording of this stream, let me give you a quick summary of what we've done so far so that you know where we are and you're not lost. So right now we're working on building a completely original adventure with a unique domain of dread, all from scratch, showing you in real time every step of the process, every thought and idea and block and what have you that goes into this. You can see really how this works as far as my process goes and how I think many GM authors how their process works. And so far, we've done a lot of work on this. We have figured out how our characters are going to get into this domain of dread through a portal that opens on the Blood Moon. We have talked about kind of personal motivations would pull them into this world. We have figured out where they land, a shanty town called Darkport that's on the edge of an inland sea. We figured out that this inland sea is a big part of this domain of dread, that it used to be the basin of a thriving metropolis that's now in ruins and flooded. We have come up with our first adventure for the characters where they are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, discover the existence of a long lost artifact that gives the wielder power over the domain of dread and realizes. They would realize that this is their best opportunity to get out alive. And so now we're working on a part of the adventure where the characters get proactive, where they've got some clues and they got some choices, and now they got to go look for this artifact. And so they have the opportunity to really explore anywhere in this domain of dread that they want to go. And so what we've done is we've used a node style structure where we've laid out a whole bunch of clues that each connect to a different node, which is, I think of as an investigative scene. It's an opportunity for the characters to interact with something in the story and learn more that can lead them to other nodes, other places to investigate, and other clues. Uh, and that can take the form of a simple encounter. It can be a skill challenge. It can be an endurance challenge. It can be a mini adventure. It can be a fully fledged adventure, just depending on how much time you want each of those things to take and how significant they are. And so we are working on building out some of the mini adventures that we're doing for this. We've already built one of them out, and now we are working on a second one, a heist style adventure that we're calling the Ghost Ship Castle Caper as our working title. And this is where the characters learn about the existence of this ship's log that supposedly has information on the last known location of the artifact. And in but that they've discovered the ship's log is held within a Sahuagin stronghold made up of the remnants of dozens of shipwrecks built up around this natural stone arch out in the sea. And so they're tasked with infiltrating this castle and having to recover this logbook if they want that information. So they've got to sneak in, they got to get it, and they got to get out. But suppose they could take another tactic, but theoretically, that's what they've got to do. And so we have built out most of this adventure so far. So if you haven't seen us go through this step by step, I really encourage you to watch some of the previous videos. But effectively, what we've done is we've used a modified version of the five room dungeon, what I call the five scene dungeon, where instead of thinking of these as individual places, physical locations within the adventure, we think of these five rooms as moments within the adventure. We think of them as scenes. And so we've gone through and we've filled out our adventure using that in mind. So we started with our entry, and so we think about heist planning. What kind of information the character is going to want or going to need to pull this heist off? What can they collect ahead of time to give them some success and to maybe make this a little easier for them as they enter into the stronghold? And we've put some ideas for that down. We've come up with some ideas on how they might go about getting that information. But really, we've given ourselves some tools to work with here. Next is our setback. And in this case, instead of it being a specific trap or something along those lines, we're talking about what happens when things go wrong. And so we've come up with various alert statuses. How active are the various encounter groups or action groups within the stronghold? How easy are they to alert? um, and then what happens when the alarm is raised, as well as what happens if things go completely sideways and the characters get captured. So we've come up with some steps for that. And then we've been working on, what the Five Room Dungeon would be called a puzzle, but really, I think of it more as a challenge. And it's pretty simple in a heist. Uh, it is it's the challenge is to find the thing that they're there looking for, right? The ship's log. And so we've created out a whole bunch of potential rooms within this stronghold, places where the characters might search, interact with, and gave ourselves some descriptions. And this is by no means comprehensive. When we create the map, we'll probably end up adding a few more, just by virtue of how everything kind of fits together. But we've filled this out. We've given them hazards. We're working on getting them some treasure right now. The only thing that we didn't include in these descriptions really is the various encounters. Instead, we put those in a table so that it's easier for us to move them around and make this a more dynamic sort of environment, making the stronghold feel more like it's alive and less like it's just a series of static encounters. That brings us then to what would be the BBEG in a five-room dungeon, or in a five-scene dungeon, and we call that the climax. It's the final challenge that must be overcome. And so we came up with the idea that an envoy from a different faction, specifically the Slotty-led faction, one we've developed as part of a previous adventure, have arrived, and they're looking for that logbook themselves because they want the artifact too. And now there's more eyes and more opportunities for the characters to get noticed as they try to slink out. And there's people actively looking for the thing that they've stolen. And so there's a higher state of alert as they try to escape, meaning it's harder to get out than it was to get in. And then the last is the reward. And instead of a physical, tangible treasure, which we're going to litter throughout here, the reward in the terms of this adventure is really the information the logbook provides. It moves the story and the adventurers forward. And so we've outlined that as simply as we can. All right. So, like I said, we've pretty much done just about everything for this, other than make the map and put in some treasure. And we've got requests to create the map using Inkarnate, and I think we're on track to do that on Monday. I've been playing around with the pro version of Inkarnate, just to kind of better demonstrate it for you guys. It's been a while since I've used the program, so we'll play around with that on Monday when we try to start making the map on this. But for today, we're going to round out the treasure that we've got to put in here. We started working on that last time, and we're going to continue talking about my methodology here. So, real quick before we begin, please bear in mind this is an interactive stream. So, as you've got thoughts, ideas, opinions, suggestions, questions, or anything you just want to talk about, jump in the chat, and and don't be shy. I love hearing from you guys. You come up with some amazing ideas. So we've got one comment already, Mr. Max. Hey, RJ, I just remembered to grab my earbud to watch it work. Awesome. I'm glad you're joining us from work, Greg. It's always good to have you here. All right. So, in terms of treasure, we had last time talked about using some of the guidance from the Dungeon Master's Guide, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, and for this, and they have simplified the distribution of treasure and sort of random treasure, as you will, in populating an adventure. Instead of there being a multitude of tables and what have you, they've come up with a single one that breaks it down by challenge rating, and usually you use the challenge rating of the big boss, whatever the creature that kind of reigns over that environment, as the challenge rating for when determining treasure. And so in this case, we've got a Sahuagin Baron, who is a challenge rating 5, which means that we're looking at probably about somewhere around 4,400 gold pieces to distribute, and then we're looking at probably about 3 magic items that we want our characters to find, which means that we need to overstock a little bit because they're going to miss some of those magic items, especially since they're not in a heist encounter, or a heist adventure, they're not rewarded for exploring every room. They're rewarded for finding the thing that they need and then getting out. So we're gonna put probably about 5 magic items in here, since this isn't a terribly long adventure. and they're still within that sort of first tier of play, and so we're really trying to keep them around 11 magic items or so that range anywhere from common. Most of them are common and uncommon, with maybe a rare or two in there, to kind of keep everything as balanced as we can. Again, those are loose rules. They're not hard and fast limits or anything along those lines. Just sort of guidelines for you to play around with. We figured that we would kind of take this hoard and we would break it up into various components. That's how kind of I like to do it instead of just doing a lump of treasure in a particular place. Because then again, yeah, the characters get a huge stockpile if they find that place, but if they don't, they miss a lot. And It can feel like they've kind of gone through this whole adventure and they haven't gotten any sort of reward out of it other than, the one that they were there seeking. So, uh, what I've you know, what I will do typically is I will come up with a list of the amount of treasure I want to put into an adventure. And then as I go through the rooms, I will kind of divide that up. And so everything kind of gets scattered around, and I have a good idea of about how much treasure is in the overall environment, how much can be found. I find that personally, if I kind of do it room by room without doing some of that planning in advance, I tend to overpopulate or underpopulate the treasure, and I get a big swing in there where some adventures are treasure heavy and some are really treasure minimal, um, which can be fine if that's how you like to run your games. But it can sometimes it feels confusing to the characters, to the players, I should say. Looks like we already got a comment from Ben Elder here. Could an idea for treasure maybe be a reward for exploration? Maybe the party finds a hidden chamber from one of the ships that makes up the castle, like a smuggler's hold, maybe a mage workshop that holds an altar to summon a random elemental, demon, etc. Um, yeah, I like using treasure as a reward for exploration. I really do. I think that it's a really good option. One thing I kind of want to touch on here, then, because that raises kind of a deeper question here, and that is, what is the purpose of treasure in an adventure? Um, because you need to understand why you're putting treasure in an adventure, because that's going to determine how you allocate it, and what you're doing to uh, you know where you're putting it and why the characters find it where they do and that sort of thing. um, Now there's some obvious sort of thought processes in these, and or schools of thought in this, where hey, treasure is a reward, you give it to the characters when they achieve something. Treasure is part of the world building, it exists where it exists. Like dragons have treasure and some creatures have treasure, and your random goblins are going to have some coins on them too because they need currency to live, because that's just how economy works. And there's nothing wrong with those thought processes. Um, but what I would encourage you to do is to remember that treasure as a reward um, is ultimately, in many ways, meaningless to the characters, um, unless you give it meaning, right? So if you are running a campaign that doesn't do things like count for arrows, doesn't worry about rations, or they kind of hand wave, eating and drinking and what have you, and there consequently is not a lot of things to spend your money on. Well, then coin is meaningless. The characters will collect it and they won't care about it, and it won't feel like a reward to the players. They'll go, oh yeah, my character's got tons of gold, but they have nothing to do with it. It has then therefore has no value. The the same kind of goes with magic items, although it's a little magic items are a little harder to kind of to mess up, because they have a mechanical value, right? So they have something that is going to inherently benefit the characters in the adventure. Now, some DMs kind of get into the thought process of, oh, I need to nerf some of these magic items and counters so it's not overpowered, so the characters don't just waltz through this kind of stuff. I'm of a different mindset on that, and that is that uh, if you give the characters something really cool, let them use it in a really cool way. because that's going to make them feel good. You can always have one encounter every once in a while that kind of anticipates that and makes it a little harder, but most of the encounters, they should be able to bust out this cool magic item and use it as intended. Um, that is what gives it value. That's what makes it useful. If you don't have stuff like that in your campaign, then putting in those magic items again becomes meaningless. An example that I will put out here is I've run adventures that like I gave out like a wand of secrets or something like that, right? And the characters, while they had that wand of secrets, never found a trap door. They never found a trap. They never, had it. They never used it to actually discover anything. And so now they had this magic item that meant nothing to them. And it didn't matter that there were still secret doors and traps in that adventure. They just weren't in the spaces that the characters expected them to be. And when they tried to use the wand, nothing came back. And so now we've got a useless piece of junk, right, from their point of view. So you want to make sure that if you're putting in some magic items, that there's things that are going to be used, because that also kind of brings us to the second tier, of this sort of thought process about treasure, and that's that ultimately, from my perspective, treasure is not for the characters; it's for the players. It's to make the players feel good. It's to make the players feel like they've won something, right? And so so if there is stuff that their characters can benefit from with coin, they're going to feel good about coin. If there is stuff that their characters can be able to do with this new magic item, they're going to feel good about that magic item. And ultimately, that's the fundamental goal of treasure, is to make the players feel good, not the characters. So that's kind of my thought process on treasure, and it's something that I like to think about while I am putting treasure into adventures like this. And so we're going to kind of apply that as we work through this. Before we do, it looks like we've got another comment. We've got Mr. Max here says, "Do you ever give a reward that the party is unaware of its importance, and they either sell it and miss out on its potential, or do you implement things to make sure it isn't skipped?" Um, Yes, I absolutely have given the characters rewards that they don't understand the importance of. But here's where narrative really becomes important, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you give the characters the thing that's the key to solving the mystery and then they get rid of it, which is a serious possibility, right? And so, what I will typically do for that kind of thing is I will try to create a narrative air of mystery around it. And that, so that the characters have questions about it, because they're less likely to get rid of it if they are unsure of, if they have questions about its value or what it does. If they think it's junk, they'll get rid of it. So you don't want to let them think it's junk. You want them to not know its significance, but to understand that it's probably significant. It's the same kind of thing that like you do in like that a lot of video games will do, where you have, they'll mark something as a story item, and you're like, I don't know what that's for yet, but I know I need to hold on to it because it's important. I don't want to get rid of it. And so just kind of putting in a little bit of that narrative, little narrative spice, if you will, on those items means that your players are less likely to kind of dump those as they go and then have to run back and collect them later. Although I will put the caveat in there that sometimes it is really fun to watch them get rid of something important and then have to go back and get it again. That can be narratively cool. You just don't want it to happen all the time. Um, you know, your players, get rid of the Maltese Falcon equivalent idol that they didn't realize was so important, and now all of a sudden they need it again. Now they got to go back and trace their steps and refine this thing. That can be a fun experience if it happens once or twice, but it shouldn't be a regular kind of encounter. At least I don't think so. Let's see here. We've got Caper Smiths. Woohoo! Finally caught you live. Yeah, fantastic. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. All right, so let's get back into putting some treasure in the adventure here. We started off with kind of splitting up some of the treasure hoard, and we decided that one place where we want to dump a good lump of treasure, to kind of perhaps lure our characters sort of out of out of their search for the logbook is the treasure room in this castle, in this stronghold. And so we figured maybe if we put about half the coin that we're putting in there, and in assorted coinage, and then we need to put a magic item or two in there, probably two. That I think about it, just because it's the treasure room, you expect there to be a kind of a heap of stuff in here, or else why make it a treasure room? So we'll drop a couple things in there. We want to pick items that are going to be useful to our characters, that are gonna make them feel good or might help them out as they go. One more comment. We've got Ben Elder. Could there be a magic seashell that the Sahuagin used to calm, confuse the sharks to let them get through flooded areas? Maybe on a captain guard, give players use of animal friendship or similar. Yeah, absolutely. You could do stuff like that. 100% you could. Um, in fact, stuff like that, I really love putting into adventures that are earlier on, and then making them even more useful later. Um, because that kind of comes back to Mr. Mex's comment about giving them something they're not aware of the importance, the value of yet, right? So, giving them something like that in this environment where there's a few sharks for them to deal with, and it might be useful in a moment or two. They've got it, and now they've got this thing that was useful, and okay, cool. They're probably going to hold on to it because maybe it'll be useful again. Well, now we can write an adventure where there's a whole bunch of sharks, and that using that thing might be the key to getting through in a lot of places. And it does two things for you, where it makes your um, one, it makes it a valuable piece of treasure, and then two, it really makes your players feel like you've been laying tracks for a long time, and tricks them into thinking that you are predicting their movements and what they're going to do, that you might be all knowing, which they love, which they love. All right, so yeah, 100%. We could do something like that. Let's in fact put that note on. Let's put that in the barracks room, because I like the idea of it being on the captain of the guard kind of deal, and we need treasure in there anyway. So let's say um, shark calming. Let's say conch. You know, those are those big seashells that people we sometimes see used as horns and things like that in various forms of media. So let's do that there, and we'll make a custom magic item for that. That's a useful thing to do. And I'll show you kind of my. Yeah, you know what? Let's just do that right now. Um, let's just make a magic item right now while we're here, because it doesn't have to be hard. But real quick, we got a couple other comments. Mr. Mix says kelp camouflage. Yeah, yeah. You could do something. You know, uh, they you could do something along the lines of like what is it, the cloak of elven kind, or something along the, what is it? I think I have it up here. Yeah, it would be like the cloak of elven kind, that gives a mechanical benefit. You could reskin it as kelp camouflage and make that really easy on yourself. And again, it's a little more thematic that way, and it doesn't require you to do more work. Or you could create something that's totally unique in that regard. Caper Smith says, Lord of the Flies stuff. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely could kind of do some stuff like that. I'll think about that and chew on that. Let's see, Ben Elder says that's the word conch. Completely blanked on it. Maybe the conch needs blessed seawater the guards carry to recharge. Yeah, we could do something like that. Depends on how useful we want it to be later on, right? Because if we give it something that is a limited resource, um, uh, Caper Smith says the conch was the main leadership MacGuffin. Of course, it was. Thank you. It's been a while since I've read Lord of the Flies. Um, all right. But anyway, yeah. So back to the bit about blessed seawater. Um, if we attach something to it that makes it um, limited use, and the characters need extra material to use it, um, then then it affects how useful that item is in the future. So maybe we want to, instead of saying that they need blessed seawater, maybe they just need seawater to use it. And uh, they yeah, so we could, it could be useful in water and it doesn't work on land or something like that, which means that it, we could limit it to being a shark calming and still use the, like, kind of the animal friendship sort of spell on that. Um, which means I really kind of want to build this out before we finish our session here. Um, let's see here. Capersmith says maybe because you have to blow them underwater, maybe the cost is air and breathing. Yeah, it could be that you need to have, you know, it's going to empty out your lung full of air, and so you need some other way to breathe again. Could do that. It could be something along those lines. Let's start crafting this out and see what we get. So we're gonna say, we're gonna call it the shark calming conch. I was never clear on how to pronounce that. And let's go ahead and start working on that. So, an ornate conch that casts. Let's see what spell. Because really, we're just gonna like let this thing cast a spell and make that kind of simple. It's an easy way to make magic items, especially on the fly. Now, if you've got more time to build them out and that kind of deal, you can certainly put more thought into them than this. Um, but an easy way to make magic items is to uh, just uh, give them spells. I mean, use spells as your basis for that, and that they have that kind of spell ability. And so let's kind of see what spells we can come up with. The animal friendship spell, as you said, I think makes sense. So let's start there. Let's see what that spell does. I've just got D&D Beyond up on the other screen here. Animal friendship, target beast that you can see within range. That target must succeed a wisdom saving throw or have the charm condition for the duration. If you or one of your allies deals damage to the target, the spell ends. That's nice and simple. And we can say an ornate conch that casts. I'm going to say animal friendship, but is only effective on sharks. Animal friendship when blown underwater, but is only effective on sharks. Yeah, we can work that. I mean, if we wanted to be a little closer to the Wizards of the Coast kind of terminology here, we'd say an organic conch that allows the user to cast animal friendship with blown underwater. When cast this way, animal friendship is only effective on sharks, but we know what we mean here. Now, if we didn't have this limiting factor about it being blown underwater, I would say that we would need to put a certain number of charges on this, right? Because we would want there to be some limit to its use. You don't want a magic item that can, well, I won't say you don't want a magic item that can cast spells kind of at will, because there is nothing wrong with that, but you want to be careful about that. Because you never know what kind of situations you're going to create for yourself. So giving it some kind of limitation makes it so that the characters are, have to consider when they're going to use it, or they're only able to use it under certain circumstances. For example, the term shark is not a codified term in D&D, right? So we might, as a DM, have a lot of discretion on what qualifies as a shark. So for example, I would say that a boulette would be calmed by this, assuming you can blow it under water and the boulette can hear. And so we can end up in sort of some creative situations with this kind of thing. But by giving it this bit about needing to be blown underwater, or perhaps giving it charges that it uses once a day, that it regains during the day. That puts some guardrails on this. Ben Elder says maybe make it any and all sharks in the range of and the range is affected. Yeah, yeah, we could do that. Um, we should also probably set a DC for this. Now that I think about it, because it does require a wisdom saving throw on the part of the shark. And we want to say, well, we want this to be pretty effective. So, Honorary Contact has animal friendship. We'll say DC 15. That's pretty high for a shark to have to overcome. Blown underwater, but is only effective on sharks. Um, we'll say sharks within range. Yeah, I think the kind of all sharks is we could reword it, but it could be implied in that capacity. Ben Elder says maybe twist could be a performance check, DC 8, and a fail enrages the sharks instead. Oh, that's twisted, and I like it. Um, hmm, hmm. I think I think I'm gonna leave that off of this, and specifically because we're putting this in a high style adventure, it's already gonna make the characters sweat the idea that they should blow a horn while they're trying to sneak around. Um, it's already gonna be something that they're like, "Ooh, we have this item, could be super useful, but if we use it, we might blow our cover." So instead of adding one more layer of difficulty to that, which might encourage them to just not use it, um, I think we'll leave it the way that it is for the moment. But I do like where your head's at in taking some magic items and giving them a little bit of a twist like that, so they're not always perfectly effective. That there is some option for failure. Um, Mr. Mex asked, would you need to use some sort of check to successfully use it underwater? Um, how I would DM this, and I know we're at our time, so we'll get wrapped up here shortly, but is you've got a character and they're underwater and they're going to blow this. If they, are holding their breath, it's going to take their lung full of air. And now, now they're going into, suffocation rules, right? Until they get air. And so that puts another pressure on them to, to get out of the water, to find an air source, or to do something else. And so I wouldn't worry about making a check for that. And if they've gone underwater and they already have something that lets them breathe underwater, like a ring of water breathing or the like, well then they've taken steps to mitigate this, and I want to reward them by letting them use this a little more freely. So typically for magic items, I don't require a check to use them. That being said, uh, typically is the answer to that. Um, every once in a while, it's a lot of fun to subvert expectations. And when characters think they can just use an item, making them make an ability check to see if they can use it effectively. Again, you don't want to do it a lot because then they start to wonder whether or not they should use these items, and they get stuff and they think, "Oh, I'm not good at that check. This is useless to me." It kind of gets into that bit about rewarding the players versus rewarding the characters. But every once in a while, a lot of fun, especially if the items are intelligent. That's a fun one to do too. Caper Smith says, enraging is excellent, very devious. Agree with the difficulty layers though. Mr. Max says, Nat 1, the user cuts themselves on the cock and chum the water activates. Ben Elder says, I like it that maybe instead of a gong sound, it plays the Jaws theme. Again, that comes back to whatever kind of campaign you want to run, right? Is this Mission Impossible or is it Benny Hill? And if it's Benny Hill, then 100% it should play the Jaws theme. All right, that's fantastic. Thanks everybody. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up here for the night since we're at our time. I know we haven't gotten through all the treasure bits here, but really we've kind of talked about my methodology for this and how I approach And so while we'll come back and we'll fill out some of the treasure later on, I do want to target doing Monday to where we actually build the map for this. Because while you don't need maps for every adventure, having a map for a high style adventure is very useful. And so we're going to dive into Incarnate and we're going to kind of go over that and spend an hour playing around and seeing if we can build out this stronghold as we go. So, thank you again for watching. If you've enjoyed my content, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff helps the channel grow and helps more people find us and jump in the chat and come with cool ideas like you guys. Um, I am also a professional DM, so if you want to jump into one of my tables, come check me out. It's startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. You can jump into all of my D&D tables there, and stay tuned because I might be doing some Shadow Dark in the near future as well if you want to try that out. Um, all right. Otherwise, I will see you all on our Monday stream. Talk to you then. Have a good one.